You all right?
Yeah, I'm doing good.
Good.
Doing real good. So it's a pleasure to have my friend Khambrel Marshall here. Welcome to Congregation Beth Yeshurun.
Thank you.
We normally have a fairly full sanctuary, but we are delighted to have some of our members that are still feel comfortable coming as we limit our congregational size to 20 members during this time. But we, of course, have hundreds, if not thousands, of people watching every Friday night and Saturday. So we're truly delighted to have all of you join us from home. And of course, it's a pleasure to have you here. Many of you know Khambrel. Just to remind you, he's a member of the KPRC2 Severe Weather Team and delivers the weekend forecast to help you plan your day. He's also a host of Houston Newsmakers with Khambrel Marshall, a weekly program that delves into issues in the news that Southeast Texans most care about. He's won numerous awards in journalism and community service. Among them is one of broadcasting's top awards, the Emmy, for a feature series titled Guardians at Sea, chronicling the efforts of the U.S. Coast Guard to rescue Cuban and Haitian refugees crossing the Florida Straits. He has a tireless commitment to volunteer service and has been honored as March of Dimes Texas Communications Volunteer of the Year. He was chairman of the 2011 March for Babies in Houston and co-chair of the Susan G. Komen Race for the Cure for 2 years and helped raise hundreds of thousands of dollars for breast cancer research. He's also a past chairman of the executive committee of Big Brothers Big Sisters of Southeast Texas. He's been married since 1979 to his wife Debbie, and they have 3 daughters and 2 grandchildren. I thought I was busy. I am impressed, and so I want to start. You know, we see you on Channel 2 almost every day and on the weekends, but tell us a little bit more about your work. And I've always been interested to know, how did Newsmakers get its start?
It's all about being in the right place at the right time. This program was on the air. It was called Beyond the Headlines. Some people may remember it. It was on at 5:30 a.m. on Sunday mornings. And it was started as a result of some things that were going on in the Houston area, and our station general manager at the time felt that we needed to revive that show. Once upon a time, it was just called Newsmakers. Bill Baeza used to host it many years ago. It had Sonny Messiah Giles from the Houston Defender and Dan Patrick, who was then a radio guy, on the show, and then it went away for a number of years. And a new general manager brought it back as Beyond the Headlines. Another general manager came in and said, you know what? 5:30 in the morning is just putting it on just to show that we have a show. It's not really putting it in a place.
Especially on a Sunday morning.
Exactly. Yeah. And it was just an awkward spot because a lot of times it was it was either running just before or just after these infomercials about colon cleansing. It was just awkward. It was just really awkward. So the new general manager came in and said, you know what, we're going to put it in a different place. And there was a young lady who was hosting it at the time, very good, longtime member of this community. And he said, you know what, she's great, but she's not on the air here. People don't really know her. And so he said, if we're going to have the show, we want to have somebody on who people can know. And I'd been here as an anchor and for a number of years before I went off the air as a manager. And so he said, we want you to do it. And I said, that's great. That's what I love to do. So I got the opportunity, and that was, I'm sure, about 12 years ago now.
So it's been that long.
Time flies. I started looking back. I tried to remember. I saw some old pictures of me wearing a straight tie. I haven't worn a straight tie in a long time.
Yeah, where did the bow tie come? I love it. Yeah, in fact, one of our members, Saul Levine, is wearing one tonight in honor of you.
He looks better than I do in a tie, I'll tell you that. I wish I could look that good. I was emceeing an event on a Saturday night, and I didn't have time to change clothes. I had a tux and I had a bow tie. And I said, I'm just going to do the weather. And at that time, I was working the evening shift. I'm just going to do the weather. And I got so much positive response from that. It was Christmas time, holiday time, and so it was a colorful tie. And I said, let me do that again for a second night. And I just kept getting on. So and a lot of the people who were commenting were women. So I said, well, that's it. I'm gonna keep it. If women said it looks good, that's it.
As long as your wife was okay with it, why not?
Yeah, she's fine. She's fine with it. Yeah.
Now, you've lived in Houston for how many years now?
21.
So a lot of your career has been here, and certainly you've raised your
well,
daughter?
half of it. I've been doing this. Yeah, 45 years I've been in the business. I started
45 years?
Yeah, I'm older than I look. You know that, right?
I thought you were in your 40s, You look
Yeah,
good.
Yeah, I'll be 68 in December.
You're kidding.
No.
Wow.
So it's all heredity. It has
Maybe you
nothing
can
to-
share your secrets
Just
later
heredity.
tonight.
Yeah. My father lived to 98. He was great. He had a great life until he had a stroke 5 years before his death. And his mother lived to 107. So on that side of the family, the genes are really deep. My mom, unfortunately, passed away at 61. So I live every day as if I'm not sure which part of the gene pool I got. And so I just live knowing that I just got to leave it all out there and go for it.
Well, so far so good. So
Yeah.
let me ask you, what makes Houston a city that you love? What's unique about Houston compared to other places you've been?
I just think it's the way that Houstonians embrace each other. I remember when I was in Miami, I lived in Miami for 13 years. And I remember that I was there for the first 7 years before I met my neighbor our back fences joined.
Yeah.
And the reason I met him was because Hurricane Andrew came along and blew our fence down. So then we had to meet.
I remember that.
Now, my neighbor across the street, but people weren't just very friendly. But I remember when I moved into my home I live in Sugar Land. I moved in, and we hadn't been there very long, and people were coming to the door, hello, how are you, bringing food and pies, and the young ladies were coming by because they saw that I had a couple young ladies in my house. My daughters were 9th grade and 7th grade at the time. And so there was just a friendliness that I recognized right away, just for the community. And shortly thereafter, we went through Tropical Storm Allison, and all the outpouring came out. I was on the air for 8, 9, 10 hours at a time, and just seeing how people came together, it is an amazing way that we've done that. And I think a lot of it happens because a lot of us have come from other places. There's some homegrown folk here, absolutely, that Southern hospitality is there. But there are a lot of people who came from other places and were embraced by those who were here. And I think that made them feel that much more at home, and therefore it's all of our benefit to continue to make it a good community to live in. So we kind of roll up our sleeves and go for it.
I would agree with you. I hear that so often. I've experienced living here for 21 years, or almost 20 years myself, and there is a difference here in Houston.
Yeah, and I've lived a lot as an Army brat. My dad was in the military for 30 years, United States Army, 82nd Airborne, 555th, the Triple Nickels, the first and only all-black parachute infantry division.
Wow.
World War II in North Africa and Italy and Vietnam twice. So I moved around a lot. And so this place has been by far the most welcoming place, and the place I said, okay, I'm not leaving here unless it's feet first, and I don't anticipate that happening anytime soon. I hope not.
Yeah.
You never know.
Double your bets here. You can say it to your church and your synagogue.
I know.
And speaking of church, I know faith is a big part of your life. How has faith played a role in the work that you do?
Wow. This business, we see so much.
Yeah.
And it really is challenging and difficult many times to see what we see and to carry on our lives on a regular basis. We're not unlike many other people. We see things, you can't unsee them. And so for me, it's always been, I'm fortunate that I was raised in a home where faith was all around me. My grandfather, who I never met because he died when my mom was 10 years old, my grandfather was a Methodist minister. And so my mother grew up with that background, and so I grew up in a Methodist church. And I always remember that it wasn't whether or not I was going to church. That was never a question. She said, if you wake up and you're able to breathe, you're going to church. And so that was my deal, and I would never forget when I was 14 years old, I realized that I was a man now, and I determined that I was going to tell my mother that, you know what, I don't think I'm going to church this week. And she said, okay. My mother was brilliant. And she said, okay, fine. And so I didn't go. And I didn't go the next week. I didn't go to the next week. I didn't go to the next week. She never said a word to me. And I came back to her and I said, I was missing something. I was missing something in my life at that point. Even at the age of 14, I thought I was a man. I knew everything. I was missing that relationship that we had when we go to commune with each other in church. And so I said, you know, Mommy, I want to go back to church. She says, you know what time we leave? And she knew at that time, she said, I had to make the decision. I'd gotten to a point in my life where it could no longer be dictated that I go to church. I needed to go because I needed to be spiritually guided to go there. And I felt a big emptiness. So in my life as a professional, I feel myself every day going to work and wanting to be like the scriptures tell me I should be, knowing that I'll always fall short of it, but knowing that I have an opportunity to try to be like the scriptures ask me to be. So that's what I do, and I ask and I pray for those around me to be safe, and I also ask that we can see what we see and not be changed negatively because of it, but maybe we're able to act positively as a result of what we see, to do something on somebody's behalf. So it's always been a big part of everything I do. My children, God bless them, have all grown up and have been spiritual. I give my wife all the credit, by the way, a lot of the credit. After, when I got married to her, I always say that she's a straw that stirs the drink in my household. And I remember when my kids would go to school, she would drive them to school, and on the way to school every day they would pray. And when their first preschool, it was a Riverside Church, Riverside Baptist Church. It was a Riverside Child Development. They bring in the kids from age 3 through first, kindergarten, and then they're off to regular school. Pray on the way and thank God for the blessings we have, and also show that because we have, maybe other people don't have, and we have an obligation to try to make sure that we can do what we can to make their lives better.
I love that message, and it's something that we share, Jewish people, Christians, Muslims, so many good religions out there, and that is that essence, right? That faith, having God in your life, can direct you to do the right thing. We see it in the work you do, and I think for many of us who are blessed with faith. And I love that message from your mother. I hope all our parents heard that. That was brilliant. She was a brilliant woman. She knew what she was doing.
Absolutely, and I will tell you that I hit a bump in my life after she passed away at the age of 61, because I was really angry at God for that. I thought that my mother was pretty close to a saint on earth.
Yeah.
And how dare you take her from me? And so it took me a while to come to grips with the fact that I wasn't in control, and that a lot of things that happen in our lives we don't have the answers for, but that we can't let it shake our faith in Him. And so I leaned back on my mother's teachings to help me get over there. But there was a period of time when I said, you know what? Mommy always told me that I couldn't have a motorcycle because it was too dangerous. I went out and bought a motorcycle. I just said, you know what? If you're going to take my mom, then I don't deserve, I'm certainly not high up on the list of people to keep around if you're going to take her. So, but I got over it.
Okay, but you're not driving that motorcycle
anymore.
No,
No. That's crazy talk.
Yeah, please don't.
A couple of close calls is all I needed.
I can imagine. So, speaking about life outside our control, I think for all of us, there's never been a time where more things are out of our control. And I know it's changed your work over at Channel 2, but what advice would you give us all on how we can maintain our sanity and our faith as we work through this pandemic?
You're right, it is a tremendous challenge across the board. We've gotten it, not only do we have a pandemic, we have a political season that has people sniping at each other. We're in political silos that are so deep that we don't hear each other. We hear, but we don't listen. And so that's a real challenging thing for all of us. We've talked about it before, about the way that we can't come together, we can't compromise because we're so entrenched in things that may be based upon false information. But what I've been able to do through this, and some people know, I don't keep it a secret. My wife is in Maryland most of the year. Her parents are, we're in the process of moving my mother-in-law into permanent hospice care, and my father-in-law is not going to be able to walk again. My wife is there pretty much 10 months out of the year.
Take care of her.
So I'm here, and so through the pandemic, I've seen her twice. And so, but I just bought a ticket today. I'm going to see her next week.
Good.
So yeah, I got to take my ID so I can introduce myself. But we have relied on each other. We talk every day, and through this period of time when the pandemic makes things difficult, but our own personal lives can be difficult as well. But we rely on each other. We rely on our own faith and how our own children's faith keeps us together as a family. The foundation has been laid, and so now it's a matter of relying on the strength of that foundation to make sure that we can have strength to this period of time. We pray together, we FaceTime together, we give each other confidence to go through the next day, because she's under a lot of stress. And so she calls me because she's at her wit's end. And so I'm the person who helps. And when I'm having difficulty, she's that person for me. So during this pandemic, there's nothing more important than family, nothing. And I think that goes for the immediate family, that goes for the church family, that goes for the synagogue family, that goes for our community family, those people who we hold close, those people who rely on to give us confidence when we're lacking confidence, those people we rely on when we're looking for a smile when no one else is smiling, even though we have masks, can't see it all the time, right? Although my eyes show my smile all the time. I think a lot of us do that. That's how I get through this, and each day is a different day. You know, I get up pretty early when I go to work on weekends, so I have to just kind of gear down and try to go to sleep as soon as I can and get up, and it's a whole brand new day. Thank God for it as I go to work, pray on my way to work every day, asking him to give me the ability to be informative and entertaining.
Yeah.
Got to have both.
You got to have both in today's meeting.
And be able to leave work and be as happy and make people around me happy and feel my presence. That's the goal that I have every day.
Yeah, well, you're succeeding. So let's spend our last few minutes together talking about an important issue, the Black-Jewish relations. Mm-hmm. In fact, next week is Black-Jewish Unity Week, a partnership between the American Jewish Community and the National Urban League. So let me start. What's the perception that you see of the Jewish community here in Houston?
I have always perceived it as being a really close community, really philanthropic community as it relates to money and talent and giving of time, which is just as important in many ways.
Yeah.
I've been fortunate to have interacted with a number of people and organizations in our community that are the Jewish Community Center over there, where I've been able to be a part of seeing some of the programs there and being a part of the organizations, what they do. So that's my perception, and that's what I get. And I'm glad to hear of your relationship with the Urban League, because I have a close relationship with the Urban League here as well, and with the Urban League in Miami and Florida when I was there, and in Arizona when I was there. And I know they have a strong history of getting into the grassroots of the community. And I think it's a great opportunity to have that relationship really grow and have an ability to understand each other's cultures. Yeah. That's kind of a big key, because so often, you know, I've done stories, and I think we've done stories with you as well, how, you know, sometimes when our worship times, that's typically some of the most segregated times in our communities across the world, because we come together, and it's not meant to be a negative thing. It's just the way we've grown together like that. And so many of our congregations are pretty straightforward in certain demographics.
Right.
And so I think so much of the time we lose opportunities when we're not cross-pollinating a little bit. We're not asking each other to give up what they believe, but being able to share and be a part of somebody else's service. So, because I was back, I enjoyed this service. I didn't understand what you were saying, but I enjoyed this service. I could feel the love about what it meant. I could feel it. And so I think if you have faith, you can feel that across denominations. You can feel that across religions. You can feel that. And so I'm a strong believer in that. And I believe in this community, the Jewish community here has always, I've perceived, on the front lines of doing things, calling it as it is. If it's wrong, we have to do something about it. And oftentimes we see the African American community and the Jewish community hand in hand, arm in arm, walking together, fighting against the wrongs that are in this country, just like it happened during the 60s in the civil rights era. I mean, we talk about, the NAACP was founded by Jewish communities and African American communities, making sure that those communities would be lifted up. So we've always had this relationship. History has told us we have always walked hand in hand, arm in arm, against injustices against people. We just always have. And this community in the Houston area it's just by far one of the best organizations I've seen across the board in terms of how this community reacts to things that need to be changed in our community for the better.
Now, I appreciate you saying that, and I'm not surprised, because I know how informed you are, and you understand. And that's, I think, one of the hard things for American Jews right now, is that many of us know about that great relationship, that history of working hand in hand to help each other during the civil rights movement until today. And then, but I don't know if enough Jews, I don't know if enough Americans, I don't know if enough African Americans know about that history. And so I tell my members, don't complain about it. Get out there and show them that we still are committed. We still care. We still want to make a difference. We still understand that there's a lot more work to do. As our congregational president, Jared Bloom, pointed out a few minutes ago, he reminded us that not only do we have this great history, but that we can accomplish incredible things when we come together as partners and learn from each other.
And I think part of it is because we shared persecutions.
Yeah.
You know, there was a persecution of Jews all over the world.
Right.
And in this country, African Americans have been persecuted through generations as well.
That's right.
You know, as an 8-year-old kid, I had a cross burned in my yard in Arkansas. Those kinds of things happened because in the 50s, that's what happened in Arkansas, putting people in their place. That sort of thing impacted my life for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
It makes me very resistant and not tolerant of prejudice. Just don't have it. I mean, that's the only thing. In my business as a journalist, I don't give, quote, my opinions about things. You'll never hear me talk about politics and taking a side or anything like that, because it's important for me to be as objective as I possibly can, at least to appear that way. I have my opinions, but I don't share them. You know, Lerone Bennett once said the only objective journalist is the dead journalist. And he meant that from the standpoint that everybody brings their own life experience into their circumstance. We come to work, we can't take our own life experience and decide, well, it didn't happen. I can't come to work and say, well, I'm going to do a story on the Klan today, but they're great guys, because they just are.
Right.
Well, I don't believe that, because I've had the experience where they aren't. But if I'm going to cover a story, and I have done that in the past, I've got to do it both ways. So I think the mutual persecution that we have shared gives us the benefit to be able to have a little bit more understanding about each other. And I think that's why, somebody's got to walk. I remember some churches used to be able to share services. I don't know where that was.
It happens
every now and then.
Yeah, not as much as it probably should. And
Right.
I'm hoping after this pandemic we can, you know, ADL does a great job of making that happen, and AJC and the National Urban League. But I agree, that's a great way for people to really get to know each other.
It is,
and appreciate each other.
The music here is great. The music at the church I go to now, the Church Without Walls, is
I bet
great.
It's pretty amazing.
It's great too. You know,
Yeah.
you walk in, is this a concert or is this a sermon? You
Yeah.
know, 'cause the music is really there. So you could really, you know, foot patting music and seeing people how they praise and how you praise and worship. It's just a wonderful opportunity, and that's what this community provides.
And we need to do more of. And, you know, I often remind my members too, is that you're right, we share a shared history. We have a history of working together because unfortunately, we've been persecuted probably more than any other peoples on the face of this planet, Jews and blacks. Mm-hmm. And there's nothing more that Klansmen and white supremacists would like is to drive a wedge between our communities. We can't let that happen. We have to work together to stamp out hatred and racism, anti-Semitism and prejudice. And when we work together, our communities, there's so much passion there, and spirit, and drive, and commitment. We can succeed.
I'm a firm believer in that, and I always ask the question I do some Facebook Lives where I tell people all the time, you're not going to get my opinion, but I'm going to ask you questions about things, and it's going to be about truth. And one of the questions I ask is, how do we continue to focus on the needs for social justice to be in place without it taking the wrong turn, without it being misunderstood? Because I think we can see in the streets when you see people throwing bricks and things like that, that's not what Congressman John Lewis meant when he said good trouble.
Right.
He was a guy who maybe sat down. He was not one who's going to throw a rock or cause some harm or that sort of thing. So the message gets usurped. And so people hear about Black Lives Matter. Well, is it Black Lives Matter the movement or Black Lives Matter the organization? Which is it? And how do you embrace that, or do you embrace that? You know, it's a confounding situation. It's a conundrum, really, because I think no one is out there is going to say, well, I think it's okay that there's social injustice around. No one's going to say that, but what do you do to show that you are taking a stand against social injustice?
Yeah.
That's where the challenge is.
And we can all take a stand, a peaceful stand, and we can make a difference. And every single one of us, there are things we can do. And so tonight, I think, was one of the more positive things that we're trying to do here at Beth Yeshurun, and I know you're doing in your life. And It's been a pleasure having you here. We hope to have you again. You're always welcome. And I thought it would be nice this evening. You heard how much faith, what a big part of Khambrel's life is his faith and his commitment to religion, his religion. And I know it is for all of us as well. And so I thought we'd end with a prayer. I shared with this with you earlier.
Right.
We were going to read responsibly a prayer, as I mentioned.
You get a bigger
Oh,
font.
you got a bigger font. You know, I thought about that, but I thought you were 48, not 68. So I didn't.
It's not that much bigger. Looks like I'm going to need my glasses anyway.
You know, I probably do too, but I'm going to try. But this is a Black Jewish unity prayer. We're going to have it on our screens for those at home, and then for those who are here, you can hear it. All of us will hear it. We're going to read responsively. As I mentioned earlier, next week is Black Jewish Unity Week. So to end this program, to begin this Shabbat, and we think about next week, let's end with prayer. God, creator of all, we pray that our people, blacks and Jews, come together once again in unity.
Our struggles to be free from the Exodus to the civil rights movement inspire us.
We're the heirs of proud traditions that know oppression and labor for liberation. We will not desist until all are redeemed.
At a time when hate is rising, we commit to modeling love.
When racism and anti-Semitism rear their ugly heads, we will show the better way, how light overcomes darkness and justice defeats evil.
There are those, even among our own, who would divide us, but we will not allow them to prevail.
We are marching together again, led by the spirit of Dr. King and Rabbi Heschel, tied in a single garment of destiny, praying with our legs.
Our religious traditions call upon us to emulate our God as healer, love our neighbor, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, strive together towards good works, and judge others by the content of their character, not the color of their skin.
We cherish religious, racial, and ethnic diversity and defend pluralism as a bedrock foundation for America's future.
We reject denigration and exclusion and embrace elevation and inclusion.
We pray that you, God, will be with us as we join with our Jewish and Black brothers and sisters to work together in fixing the broken and fulfilling the promise of a healed world.
Turn us toward you, God, and we will return to you. Renew our days as of old. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Khambrel, again for joining us. Thank you for everyone for tuning in, and we hope to see you soon. And Shabbat Shalom, everyone.
Thank you, sir.
That was fantastic. Thank you.